Namaste friends, welcome to another episode of the Essence of the Bhagavad Gita. So we are still on chapter 4 of the Gita, and the verse that I picked for today is verse 29 of chapter 4. That is certainly one of the most important verses for all of us on this path of Kriya Yoga and who follow the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. But as I've been doing in the last few episodes, I am going to talk about a few more verses also because I think there are a lot of important verses in this section. I don't want to miss any of them. So as always, I'll first read the verse for you in Sanskrit, and I'm going to give the meaning of the verse. This is verse 29 from chapter 4. Apane juhvati pranam, pranopanam tatapare, prana apana gatirudva, pranayama parayanaha. And this is the literal translation of the verse as written by Swami Kriyananda. Some yogis offer the incoming breath or prana into the outgoing breath or apana, and the apana into the prana, thereby through pranayama or the control of that energy, render breathing unnecessary. Now, it cannot be said about most verses in the Gita, but certainly for this one can say, you need a commentary on this. You don't know what Krishna is talking about, exactly. He's talking about rendering breathing unnecessary. That part is clear what the goal is, but what does it mean to offer prana into apana, apana into prana? It's one of those rather cryptic verses from the scripture that you need a true guru or a teacher to interpret for you. And Yoganandaji and Swami Kriyananda have done that for us, and I want to discuss and share some of those interpretations with you today. Like I was saying, I'm going to expand beyond this verse. Before I get to 29, this entire section of verses 25 to 30, I'm actually speaking about all 5 verses today in this talk because they're all quite closely connected and related because they're talking about the same thing. Even pulling further back, we are looking at chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita, which is this chapter on Jnana Yoga. And Krishna is describing to Arjuna what wisdom is, what inner wisdom and discrimination is. And interestingly, the first section of this chapter is almost a continuation of the third chapter, which was the chapter on Karma Yoga, where we were still discussing the right ways to act in this world. But the discussion was getting a little subtler as we looked at it last week. This distinction between action and inaction. What does it mean? What does action inside and outside and inaction inside and outside? How do you engage with the world? And ultimately, we came to this conclusion that it is all about the ego involvement. It is the attachment of the ego that taints or defines what action and inaction are. That was the point of that section of chapter 4 of the Gita. And quite logically, Krishna goes on to further discussion into the same topic. And then he describes how this is at the center of everything. The linchpin behind all of this, that's tying all of this together, is the ego that we hold on to. So the next obvious question is, how do you loosen the grip of that ego? How do you offer that ego into the superconscious? And Krishna, in these 5 verses 26 or 25 to 36 verses of chapter 4, he describes various different ways in which the ego can be dissolved, in which the ego attachment can be offered up. And I can see from these verses, there are at least, I would say, 8 or 10 different ways that Krishna offers. That's why I said I cannot just talk about one. I'm going to briefly mention the different methods of disengaging the ego or offering that ego up that Krishna discusses in this section of the 4th chapter. And then I do want to focus specifically on verse 29 that I just read. So let me start with verse 25 so it's clear to us where this is going, and I can start from the very first words of Krishna on this topic. Krishna starts by saying, this is all talking about freeing oneself from ego identification. And this is the first thing that Krishna says. Some yogis there are who make sacrifices to the devas or the deities. Others see sacrifice or yajna as an offering of the self into the cosmic fire of spirit. This is verse 25 from chapter 4. And I'm not going to again go into detailed commentary on each of these verses. I do want to touch upon and discuss them very briefly before moving on. Like Krishna says, we offer our energies or make sacrifices to the devas, to the deities. Oftentimes in the Vedic tradition, these tend to be forces of nature, and that is one of the ways in which we loosen the grip of the ego. And the other way, he says, is that you can see that sacrifice or yajna as the offering of the self into the cosmic fire of spirit. And the second or the latter understanding of yajna is what I discussed in detail a few weeks ago. I don't remember, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago in chapter 3, where that idea of sacrifice or yajna is one of self-offering, of offering our energies into the spirit, offering everything we do at the feet of the divine. Now, Swami Kriyananda gives even a subtler interpretation for the first type of yogi that Krishna describes, where he says some yogis offer sacrifices for the devas. Swami Kriyananda says, in essence, a subtler yogic practice or a subtler interpretation of this verse of the Gita is also to see these devas or deities as residing in our astral spine, because all these energies in the universe, after all, reside in our chakras. So when we are talking about offering sacrifices or performing yajna in honor of these deities, we are actually talking about practices of offering energy into these various spinal centers. That's not often how people read it, but again, as Swami Kriyananda explains, you can certainly see the sense of how this verse can also be interpreted in that subtler way. Now, moving on to verse 26 of chapter 4, other spiritual seekers offer their inner power of hearing and of their other senses into the fire of self-control. Still others offer whatever they hear or experience through their senses into the fire of a higher understanding. I'm smiling because, it would be rather presumptuous of me to say I fully understand everything that Krishna is talking about. My sense here is, and also from what Swami Kriyananda writes in his commentary, each one of these paths or methods that Krishna is describing or mentioning in these verses, in itself, lifetimes of practice. These are all pathways leading up to the divine. That's why Krishna is describing them almost as a list of bullet points. As you can see here, the first thing that he's talking about is offering the inner power of hearing and the different senses into the fire of self-control, which is to say, practicing techniques of withdrawing our energy away from the senses. And then he says you can do that, or you can offer whatever you hear or experience through those senses into the fire of higher understanding, which is to say, you do experience those, but you offer that experience into that fire of wisdom, of greater understanding. Verse 27 of chapter 4, others by discrimination offer up their sense activities and the energy within those activities in the fires of self-control. Now this one is, I don't know, most of these verses are cryptic to me. I don't know how they sound to you. But Swami Kriyananda fortunately offers a further explanation on this, which helps me understand what Krishna is talking about. Essentially, Krishna is saying, offer up the sense activities and the energy within those activities. In essence, it is the practice of asking. The first two that we looked at in verse 26 was to offer the sense through self-control, and the second one was experiencing through the senses and offering those experiences into the fire of wisdom or higher understanding. And in this one, we are using discrimination to actually go into the depth of that sensory experience, or in other words, asking the contemplative practice of asking, who is it that's hearing? Who is it that's seeing? Who is experiencing this? What is the experience and who's that person experiencing it? Or in other words, the contemplative practice of constantly going deeper and deeper into our own sense of awareness, asking this question, who am I? This is the foundational principle of many philosophical schools of thought. The great spiritual teachers from 20th century, Ramana Maharishi, he advocated this particular practice as the key to salvation. This practice of constantly dissecting every experience in the world and going to the center of it, to the core of it, and asking, who am I? who's experiencing this? And the only answer to that is, I am pure awareness, I am consciousness. I'm not the senses, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not my thoughts or ideas. I am simply the essence of my own being, which is pure awareness, pure consciousness. And this practice, this is very interesting for us to be reading and looking at all of these on this chapter on Jnana Yoga, because Jnana Yoga often is considered or looked at as philosophical, as the study of wisdom, or trying to understand things in the right context. Those are all good practices. I'm not trying to speak against any of them. But yoga is not philosophy. Philosophy is the love for wisdom. Yoga is the practice of wisdom. They are two different things. They are closely aligned because philosophy helps us understand and tune into that wisdom more deeply, but yoga is the practice of it. So as Krishna is describing Jnana Yoga, you can see all these different techniques and ways of attaining that freedom from ego identification, as Krishna is describing here. All of them have to do with working with energies. You cannot offer yourself up into your chakras, or practice self-constraint, or offer the experience into that fire of higher understanding without using your will. Even that contemplative practice of who am I, it almost sounds like I'm sitting and thinking about something, but it's quite far from it. Jnana Yoga is the practice of discernment. It is that practice of absolute detachment from the experience, so we can go to the core of it, core of that awareness, and know truth from untruth. It is not mere contemplation or introspection. I'll discuss more of it when we come to verse 29. But it's interesting, and I want to call our attention to this fact that Krishna is describing Jnana Yoga, but every single technique that he's talking about has to do with working with our energies, because that is Jnana Yoga. Because Jnana Yoga is using our energies and will in a way that we can discern in the right way in this world. Now moving on, verse 28 of chapter 4. Some offer up their possessions as oblations, some their actions as oblations, others concentrate on withdrawing their energy by yoga meditation, that is again offering it up as an oblation, and others, holding strictly to the vow of self-restraint, offer up all their thoughts to God, practice introspection, and seek wisdom through study of scriptures. Now, there are a lot of points in there. This verse is perhaps one in this section that is not as cryptic. It's very clear what Krishna is talking about. You can even offer your possessions as oblations. That way, you loosen your attachment to material things of this world. You can practice meditation. You can draw that energy deep into the spine. You can study the scriptures. You can offer every thought up to God. As you can see, one can live their entire lifetime practicing each one of these techniques that Krishna is describing, and it would all take them to that same goal of self-realization, of complete transcendence of the ego. Now, coming to the start of the show, which we are discussing today, verse 29, is this verse on prana and apana. And the reason why I picked this verse out of this whole section, because it is particularly relevant for those of us who are tuning into the teachings of Yogananda and Babaji during these times, because what Krishna is actually describing in these verses is the practice or the technique of Kriya Yoga itself. This technique of drawing our energy in and offering the incoming and the outgoing breath into each other. Now, we often use the word prana to refer to energy in general, to refer to that cosmic energy that we are drawing into our bodies that is sustaining us. In this context, however, we are using the word prana in a much more subtle and specific connotation. There are 5 vital forces of energy in the body. And they are prana, apana, vyana, udana, and samana. I'm not going to discuss or go into them in detail because it's really not relevant for what we are discussing here. But prana in this particular context refers to a certain flow of energy in our own subtle anatomy. Let me just say that. I have to apologize for picking such a heavy verse for this 20-minute class because unfortunately I won't be able to go into all the depth and the specifics of what all of this means. But the good news is I have other videos on my channel. I often share another class on Friday mornings called The Path of Kriya Yoga, and many weeks ago I did a much more detailed episode on the subtle channels and subtle energies in our body, Ida, Pingala, Sushumna, because that discussion is very fundamental and important for understanding what Krishna is describing in this verse. But in essence, what we are talking about as prana in yogic terminology is the upward flow of energy in a subtle nerve channel called Ida that happens alongside every inhalation. That's what I'll say right now. There are three subtle channels in our astral spine, Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. Ida and Pingala are channels of duality, and Sushumna is the channel of unity or singularity. And every time we breathe, the inhalation happens because the prana or that channel of energy has life force flowing in it, and this is happening in the channel of Ida and it is flowing upward, and this upward flow of energy in Ida that causes the inhalation is called prana, technically speaking. And the downward flow of energy in the other channel, in the Pingala channel, that causes every exhalation is called apana. So these two are life currents, and both these currents are constantly flowing in our own subtle spine, and this is what is causing the inhalation and exhalation. The causality here is important for us to both note and really understand deeply, because oftentimes when people describe the flow of prana and apana, they would casually say every time we inhale, the prana flows up the Ida channel. Well, it is true, but the causality is important. What I mean by that is the flow of breath is not causing the prana to flow. It is the flow of prana that is triggering that physical act of inhalation in our body. So when we stop breathing, it's not because our lungs have lost their capacity to breathe or something has happened. Of course, those things happen to physical bodies, but when those things happen, the first impact of it is that the flow of prana is impeded, and when we are leaving the body, when we ultimately stop breathing, it is because prana stops flowing in that Ida channel. Because as long as prana is flowing there, the physical breath will happen, because that's how we are designed, and that breath is simply an indicator of that flow of prana that is happening on a subtler level. And it's not surprising, because we are talking about the astral plane and the energy body. So everything we see on the physical plane is a reflection of something subtler, and in this case we are talking about the subtler mechanics of how that physical breath is manifested. And that is why oftentimes this verse is even interpreted in many commentaries as the practice of Nadi Shodhanam, of the alternate nostril breathing, where you breathe in through one nose, then exhale through the other nose. Now, that is not exactly how Yogananda ji interpreted it, but I can also see that's not far off from the point that we are discussing here, because these two channels, Ida and Pingala, between the fifth and the sixth chakras, Ida flows on the left and Pingala flows on the right. If you have not seen pictures of Ida and Pingala, you can Google on the internet and you will be able to see these crisscrossing serpents and a straight line in between them. So these are the three nerve channels, and this center of our body, in this part of the body, Ida is flowing through the left and Pingala through the right. So the breath flowing through the left nostril is that prana, and right is the apana in terms of reflecting it in the physical breath. And so sometimes the practice of alternate nostril breathing, or what we call Nadi Shodhanam in yoga, is also a deeply spiritual practice. It does balance our nadis, not to say that it is not effective in that same way. But of course, Kriya Yoga and what Krishna is talking about here is much subtler. I know I'm talking about a lot of subtler concepts here, and if you're hearing this for the first time, this might all sound strange. I'm sorry about that. Again, as I said, I will refer you to some of these other videos and information before you can make sense of all that I'm talking about here. Now, what does it mean to offer prana into apana and apana into prana? In short, without getting into the mechanics or the technique of it, what it means is we are consciously circulating energy in our astral spine. That is the practice of Kriya Yoga. And what happens when we do that? we magnetize that central channel that is called Sushumna, and by doing so, we draw those energies from prana and apana closer and closer to their point of equilibrium at the center, which is the central channel of Sushumna. Because when energy flows in that central channel of Sushumna, then Kundalini, or that cosmic source of energy that is wound up at the base of our spine, can easily ascend through our spine, and that is the key to salvation, or key to releasing that attachment to the ego, that limitation of that ego consciousness. As energy enters our body through this point, through the medulla, as Yoganandaji explained, this is the seat of the ego, the seat of individuality. So when we manifest this body, when we are inhabiting this body and acting in this world, every moment of time we are drawing energy through this particular point into our body. That energy is what is sustaining us. And this energy is immediately drawn to the base of the spine, because there is this huge, powerful magnet called the Kundalini. It is the most powerful magnet in all of universe. It is the entire cosmic energy that is condensed in that individual form and is wound up under the base of the spine. And this Kundalini energy is the negative pole, and this point, the spiritual eye, is the positive pole. And the energy that is flowing into the body is constantly circulating between these two poles, and that is what is reflecting in the form of the physical breath. Now, when we are acting in this world, when we are just doing the things that we are doing without that inner awareness, without the practice of meditation, without practicing any technique for restraining or controlling our energy, then this prana is what the flow of energy in Ida and Pingala, the prana and apana currents, these are what tie this life force that is flowing into the body with the senses. The other piece of literature that I would highly recommend to understand all of this is chapter 26 of Autobiography of a Yogi, which you can easily find on the internet, because Yoganandaji beautifully describes all of these concepts in great detail in that chapter with reference to the practice of Kriya Yoga. So the flow of prana and apana is constantly drawing our life force out and tying them with the senses. So in a practice such as Kriya Yoga, when we start consciously circulating that energy in our subtle spine, we are loosening that grip. We are drawing that energy away from the senses and into our deeper spine, into that Sushumna, so all of that can flow upward towards the upper spinal centers in our astral spine. That is the essence of the practice of Kriya Yoga. In the autobiography, one of the beautiful things that Yogananda describes, which helped me personally a lot in my own spiritual practice, in meditation and just leading an inner life, is where he talks about the unscientific methods of introspection. It is not to say that introspection is not helpful. This whole scripture of Gita is a conversation between blind mind and introspection, between Dhritarashtra and Sanjaya. Introspection is a powerful tool for objectively evaluating this world, our life, and our experiences in perspective. But introspection is not a tool for meditation. Because what I mean by that is meditation is not a process of thinking. Meditation is not a process of contemplation. Meditation is the process of working with energies, to be able to use techniques and methods to draw that energy into our deep spine, which is what Kriya Yoga is. And he talks about the flow of this prana and apana, which is constantly drawing that energy to the senses and for us to engage in this world. And when we are able to draw that into our deep spine, we neutralize those currents. As Krishna says here, prana apana gati rudva. By neutralizing, by reversing the flow of prana and apana, these yogis, pranayama parayanaha, those who practice the sacred technique of pranayama, they are able to achieve freedom from ego. I wish I could talk about this more. Maybe I'll make a different episode in my other series that I do on Friday mornings to get into details of it. I feel a little bad that I was covering things too fast and might have been a little cryptic. Hopefully it made sense for some of you. I'll meet you next week with a different verse, and I promise that I will speak more about these concepts and explain them better in future. God bless you all.